Hello everyone, I'm Gordon from Once Upon a Stamp. We're going to be talking today about this. This is our spray emboss solution for die cutting. We call it the spray emboss solution because not only does it solve most of your die cutting problems, but it also helps enormously with the embossing stage. Now, before we start talking about this, I would just like to begin by talking a little bit about die cutting. Okay, as Once Upon a Stamp, we brought Spellbinders to the UK, round about 11 years ago I think it was. If we look at the table here, I would like to show you something you haven't seen before. Here we have the prototype for Spellbinders Wizard Machine. This machine was made by hand by Jeff Karen of Spellbinders around about 11 years ago. Now if you look at the machine, you can see that this machine has rollers, and as you know, the dies run between the rollers to make them cut. Before this machine there was no die cutting system with rollers. The original Sizzix machine was a large red press type of machine. So this machine here was the prototype for all die cutting systems that featured rollers. So first of all we had the production Wizard machine, then we had the Cuttlebug, we had the Big Shot, lots of other machines in between. But nowadays we have no Wizard machine, and now we're looking at this machine. This is Spellbinders Grand Caliber. As you all know, this is an A4 size machine, and this is the development from the Wizard all the way up to the large format machine that we see today. Most people want to cut larger things, so most people want an A4 machine. Okay, we're going to be looking at some dies. We're going to be looking at this die. This is a Spellbinders die, and I picked two dies from Spellbinders because of the intricacy and the detail of the dies. This is the first one we're going to be looking at. I'll show you another one. The next one is this one. This will be familiar to lots of people as one of the Spellbinders lattice dies. Now the intricacy of these dies is unbelievable, and these are a couple of the dies that people tell us they have problems cutting on a variety of machines, that they have to run through several times back and forward, they have to put at the side, they have to put at the corners. We know of all the problems using shims, magnetic shims, metal shims, etc. Well, we're going to try and show you hopefully how you can solve most of these problems without the use of shims. Okay. So as we say, we have the Grand Caliber here, and if most people know me, they will know that the Grand Caliber isn't a machine that I have ever particularly been fond of or used in the past. But things have changed, and now with Spray Emboss we can show you how good this machine actually is. I'll just tell you how these machines work first of all. Inside the machine, like the old prototype Wizard here, we have two rollers, a top roller, we have a bottom roller. The same thing applies to the Grand Caliber. Each side of the roller sits inside what we call bearings, and as the roller rotates with the handle, the bearings turn round. Now then, most of these machines, all of these machines in fact, are meant to cut right in the middle. But as we all know, cutting some dies, especially the more detailed dies in the middle, is not easy. So what do people do? They either use a shim, or they put the die at the side, or they put the die in the corner. Now, by doing so, what you're doing then is you're moving the pressure from the centre of the machine to the edge of the machine. And I said a minute ago, these machines, the rollers turn on bearings either side of the machine. Putting excess pressure on the side of the machine could potentially stretch the bearing and lead to failure of the die cutting machine. So we have been looking at problems to avoid this. We'll be looking at ways to solve the problems. Now, Spray Emboss isn't actually new. I invented Spray Emboss along with Robert from Once Upon a Stamp around about 10 years ago. But for various reasons we then let it lie, we forgot about it over the years. But recently, with all the die cutting problems we're hearing of, I've decided to resurrect Spray Emboss. We have reformulated it, and it's 10 times better than it ever was before. Okay, So let's get to a demonstration and show you what we mean. So on this side here we have done two things. We have got the Spellbinders lattice die, and I have some card that has actually been pre-sprayed. This card is dry, it's not damp, you can't even tell the card has been sprayed. This is sprayed card. So we can actually use the card once it's dry, once it's been treated. If you want, you can treat your card the night before in preparation for the next day if you're going to be doing lots of die cutting. Once the card is treated, it stays on the card. It has no effect on the card. It doesn't prevent you from distressing or inking or colouring. In fact, if anything, it enhances that, and we'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use this lattice die and the card that we actually treated earlier on. Okay, so first thing we will do is take the base plate of the Grand Caliber, and we're going to place the die right in the centre, not on the edge, not in the corners. And what we're trying to do with Spray Emboss is to cut any detailed die in no more than 2 runs through any machine. That's all we want to do, and we want to get excellent results. Okay, so let's show you what happens. So the die is in the centre of the plate. We now place the card on top, and we will close up with the top cutting plate. There we are. Just feed this to the Grand Caliber, and off we go. I would sing a song at this point, but we'll just keep going. My singing is not that good, folks. Okay, all the way to the end. Now once we get through the first run, we're going to stop, we're going to open the plates up, and we're going to look at the die. You will see that the die is almost completely cut on the first run through the machine, right in the centre of the board. But you will notice that there is one little tiny bit here that's not quite cut. Okay, so what do? We said earlier on that we're going to cut every die in no more than 2 runs through every machine, and we're only going forward, we're not going to go backwards. So all we do now, we turn the die 90 degrees, again we leave it right in the middle of the plate. Now at this point, if you seriously thought there was a problem with the die cutting, what you would do, you would take your Spray Emboss, you would aim it at the area and give it a quick blast. You would then leave it for maybe 30 seconds, a bit longer, or to dry if you like, which takes only about a minute, and then you're ready to go again. But I can tell you that we don't have to actually do that most of the time. So what we'll do, we've twisted the die 90 degrees, we will cover up again with the top plate and run it forward once more. So we've already run the die forward once, we've turned the die 90 degrees, forward again, right in the middle of the machine, where people say they have lots of problems with detailed dies. We're not using any shims, no metal shims, no magnetic shims, no pieces of card or paper to pad up, and we've used it right in the centre of the plates. We must emphasise this, we're doing everything in the centre of the machine. Okay, let's have a look. If Justin can zoom in on that, you can see that that die, which is one of the most detailed dies we have today, has fully cut. Okay, to prove it, just to make sure we know it's been cut, we're now going to clean the die and have a look at the results. So we have here the Spellbinders Tool-in-One, we have the high density foam. We're going to turn our die over like that, so we're now looking at the back of the die, the top of the die. Okay, we're going to very gently run up and down the die, and then we're going to run from side to side. We're not using much pressure because we're using the high density foam. If you use too much pressure, the roller from the Tool-in-One will catch in the die and potentially it will come to pieces, I'm afraid. But if you're using the high density foam, you're not using much pressure and the Tool-in-One will do its job without any force. Okay, that should be about it. Now all we do now is give it the magic tap, 1, 2, 3, and let's remove the card from the die and we'll have a look at the results. Okay, there we go. Just take that piece out there. If you look at that, it's perfect. It's cut perfect. We've cleaned it using the Tool-in-One just to prove to you that it's perfect. And that was no more than 2 runs forward through the Grand Caliber right in the centre of the machine. And that piece of card we use was treated earlier on. We left it to dry for only about a minute, just to show you that the spray emboss works after about 30 seconds once you've treated the card, or it does the same job once it's dry. Now, for all of you out of there using machines like the eBosser, for example, it's an electronic machine, and you think, oh, do I really want to use a spray on an electronic machine? Well, in fact, we're using very, very little of it, and we're not applying it to the die, we're applying it to the card only. The card is then sandwiched between your plates anyway, so I don't think there's a real problem. But to be on the safe side, for those of you using an electronic machine, then do what we've done here. Spray your card maybe the night before, or whatever, it only takes a minute or two to dry. And once it's dry, off you go. You will get the same results. And there's no fear then of any spray going anywhere near any electric motor or electric cables or anything like that. So that's just a small safety precaution if you have one of the electronic machines. Okay, so we've done that, we've seen the results. Okay, second thing we're going to do now is we're going to use this die. Now, I would actually say that this is more difficult to cut, this die. From my experience, this die is not easy to cut. But we're going to do the same again. We're going to do this right in the centre of the machine. This time we're going to spray the card. We're going to leave it for about 30 seconds. And the same thing, we want to run it through the Grand Caliber, forward motion twice. That's all we're going to do. Okay, so we'll take our base plate again, and we'll place the die right in the middle of the plate. Now, I have another piece of card here. This card is 250 grams. It's a Centura Pero card, very good card, and we will treat the card with the spray again. Now, you're probably asking yourself, how does the spray work? What does it actually do? Okay, the spray actually penetrates the fibres on the card, and it does two things. It softens the fibres, but it also bonds the fibres together. Now, that's important because we don't want to destroy the card in any way. And we can do this in anything, incidentally, from a piece of newspaper, computer paper, wallpaper, and we will not tear it. We can deeply emboss any of those things without ripping it if we're very gentle, because the spray emboss actually bonds the fibres as well as softens the fibres. And as we said a few minutes ago, we're going to treat this piece of card here, but if we leave the piece of card to dry, you will get the same results. Once the card is treated, you can do it straight away, you can do it the day after. It's entirely up to you. Okay, so let's get the spray emboss. Here we are. The spray emboss comes as a fine mist, so you're not using much. You do not want it dripping on your card. That's not the idea. That's not what we're trying to do. You do want to spray it evenly onto both sides of your card. That's all you want to do. So if we take the spray, just activate it, hold the card about maybe 12 inches, 18 inches away, and then very gently spray the card 2 or 3 times, okay, on both sides of the card. Okay. If Justin can zoom in a little bit, you can see that there is actually very little. It's a very fine mist spray, and it's not dripping on the card. There is very little on there. Now, hopefully, I have given that an even coating on the card, but we will soon find out. Okay, so I say we leave this for about 30 seconds, but as a general rule, the longer you leave it, the better it is. In my opinion, if the piece of card dries, it's even better. Okay, so maybe that's about 20 seconds or so by now. So we'll take the card. We've got the die again here placed right in the centre of the plate for the Grand Caliber. We'll put the piece of card on top like so. We will now take the top plate and close up, and we'll give it its first run through the Grand Caliber. Let me just move this so you can see. There we are. Okay, off we go for the first run. You'll have to excuse me, like lots of people, I'm suffering from hay fever at the moment, but we'll keep going. Okay, first run through the machine, and let's have a look at the results. Now, if you look at that, once again you will see that that die has almost completely cut out on the first run through the machine, right in the centre. Again, what we will do now, we'll leave it right in the middle, twist it 90 degrees. As we said before, if in doubt at this stage, any bit that's affected that you don't think is cutting, just a very quick blast with a spray emboss, then off you go after a couple of seconds, or again, leave it to dry for a minute, just wait and off you go. So here we go for the second run through the machine. We've twisted the die 90 degrees. As I said earlier on, we've no need to go back the way, all we're doing is going forward. We're trying to do this, we're trying to cut things perfectly as quickly as possible. We want perfect results every time. Okay, there we go. So once again, forward in the ground calibre, no shims, no magnetic shims, no metal shims. All we have used is spray emboss with the die right in the centre of the plates. Let's have a look at the results. Okay, if Justin can zoom in on that, you will see that that has been cut perfectly all over. Now, this is a different type of die from the lattice die we have just used. We're now going to clean the die, but you will see it's completely different because these dies are made to be joined together to form a larger die cut, or you can simply cut the whole thing out with a guillotine and use it as one piece onto a card. I'll show you what we mean. So we'll take this now. Okay, let's go back to our tool-in-one and our high density foam. Once again, we will turn that over on the foam so that we're looking at the reverse of the die. We will take the tool-in-one and we will very gently again rub all over the die, back and forward, up and down. Again, because we're using the high density foam, we're using very little pressure. We do not want those rollers to be caught in the die. So we just take our time, up and down, side to side. Okay. Okay, that should be enough now. Always pay a bit more attention to the middle than the rest. It just seems to be that way. Here we go with a magic knock. 1, 2, 3. And let's take the whole thing apart. Okay, that came out of the die quite easy. Now, if you look at this die here, as I said, is not meant to cut like the other dies. It's a completely different type of die. What you can do with this die now is you can either join pieces together, okay, or you can simply cut the whole thing out to join, to place onto your card. But as you can see, these pieces remain in the die. They're meant to remain in the die. They're not supposed to come out. This is a different type of die. Okay. So what we're going to do with this now, just to show you, is we're going to use the guillotine to cut it out. So we're going to cut the whole thing out. I'll just remove this for a second. Okay, if Justin can just have a look over here for 1 minute. Okay, we're back again. Guess what we forgot? The guillotine. Something always goes wrong, but we're only doing it once. Okay, so we'll take this die and I'll show you what we mean about this die. Okay, let's place this on here. We're going to line the edge up with the edge all the way down here to cut this die out. This is a different type of die. Okay, we will go down there. We'll now line the sides up as well. Let me just do this. Down like that. Let's just line this one up. Not only do I have hay fever, I don't have my glasses on, but we will keep going. Okay, that's that one. Let's get the last piece lined up here. Okay, so you'll see now that we've actually released the whole thing from the card. You can see more clearly what this type of die is actually all about. There's a few pieces here we just have to pick out gently. Let's just get these pieces out. And you can begin to see more clearly how this die is actually used. Okay, I'll just get the last couple of pieces out here, just to show you the whole die has actually been cut. There's one more piece I think just there. Let's get this out. There we go. Right, okay. If you can have a look at that now, that die cut is completely clean. The whole thing has been cut out. So with these types of dies, you can either use them as an expandable to cut out a larger piece of card, or you can stop at that stage, cut round the edges of the die, and that's what you end up with. So it's up to you. You have a choice with these types of dies. So basically what we've tried to do here is use two very complicated dies. We've used a Spellbinders lattice die and one of these other expandable dies. Both of these dies have enormous detail in them, and these are dies we hear a lot about people having difficulty cutting, as well of course of lots of other dies as well. We used the spray emboss. We used a piece of card where we sprayed, we left it about 20 seconds. We used another piece of card, which is a piece of card we used earlier on. We actually sprayed earlier on, we let it dry completely. It's your choice, but as we say, if you're using the electronic machines for the sake of safety, my advice would be let your piece of card dry before you do it, because we don't want anything coming into contact with any electrics and causing you a problem. Okay, if we come round to the front of the table again, where we have the prototype wizard machine, there's something else I would like to tell you. By accident, we actually found that Spray Emboss does another thing. If you look at the card samples here, you will see that each of these samples has been painted onto acetate. Now, we have a tray of our pearlescent watercolour paints there, and these are purely watercolour based pearlescent effect paints. You may remember Twinkling H2Os, but basically you can use any watercolour based paints to do what we're showing you here. So if you take your spray emboss, put a little bit in a container and use it as if it was water with a paintbrush, mix it well into your watercolour paints, you can actually paint images on acetate, plastic, on glass. Okay, now you know with water that is impossible because watercolour paints will separate, and normally the only way to do that will be with acrylic paints. But with this you can use purely watercolour paints. All you would do is put the watercolour paints on in layers, let each layer dry before you put another one, build it up, adding colour. But you can see for yourself the effects on these three items we have here. Now, I'm not a watercolour artist, I'm not an artist at all, but this one here, which is a Christmas bauble, this is one of the Just Right stamps, and just before we made this video I stamped the Just Right stamp onto acetate using StazOn ink. I then used the spray emboss to mix some in with the watercolour palette we have here. And I'll just hold this up a little bit and just move it so you can see it. I hope you can see the sort of sparkle in that. You can see that we've used the watercolour paints to great effect, and you have that beautiful pearlescent effect coming through the acetate. I'll just do the same with that one there with the daffodil. This was kindly done for me by a colleague. And this one here, which is a very rare blue rose, but never mind. But isn't that stunning? If I do that, you can see it shining. You can clearly see that this is acetate. This is not card or paper. We have painted these wonderful images onto acetate using spray emboss. So that's a secondary use for spray emboss for all of you out there that may paint with any watercolour paints. Every day we are learning new things about spray emboss, and if we discover any more, we will obviously bring it to you in another video. Well, that about wraps the video up for now. We hope you've enjoyed it. We hope you've learnt something about spray emboss, and I hope you've enjoyed seeing the prototype machine of the first ever die cutting system with rollers. This is genuinely the prototype for Spellbinders Wizard machine going back 11 years ago, and everything came from there. Every die, every machine, but that was the beginning. Okay. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. Bye bye.